Persona 5 was the reason I got a PS4. That is a fact. And so, obviously, I had quite high expectations for it. Did it completely fit these expectations? No. I'll be honest, it fell short of most of them actually, but that doesn't mean it was bad. If it fit all my expectations, it would have been an absolutely perfect game. Probably the best of all time, which, sorry, it isn't. But that doesn't at all mean it was bad, once again. Anyways, let's get into the reviewing. Oh boy, where do I even start? This game is a journey. My playthrough clocked in at over 90 hours, which isn't actually insanely long for a video game, but that's only the main story, and man, it felt like a lot longer anyways. I honestly don't know where to start with this game. I don't know, let's start with the basics, I guess. Persona 5 is a story-driven, super stylish JRPG. I've never personally played any other Persona games, and from the gameplay that I've seen, I really don't have much interest in playing any other ones. As you would guess, while it is the 5th game in the series, it doesn't actually connect to the other titles, apart from some reoccurring characters and locations, I think. In this game, you play as this guy, who you can name whatever, but I think his actual name is Akira or something. But he's most commonly known as Joker. He's a high school student who recently transferred to Shujin Academy after being charged with assault and put on probation, even though he didn't really do anything wrong. Not long after he transfers, he notices something is off, and is somehow transported to this other dimension, known as the Metaverse. The Metaverse is populated by shadows and distorted people who exist in the real world as well. You form the Phantom Thieves, whose goal is to change the hearts of these distorted people by infiltrating their palaces and stealing their treasure. Before I get into any spoiler territory, I'll stop there. So as you can already tell, the game sets up a very interesting story with some creative, fun, but also pretty serious ideas. In terms of actual gameplay, Persona 5 is a little weird. It's practically two games put into one. On one hand, you have your day-to-day activities, hanging out with people, eating food, going to school, pretty much just like a life simulator. On the other hand, you have the Metaverse and the combat, stealing hearts and engaging in stylish turn-based battles. So two pretty different aspects of a game, but I actually think they work very well together. If I was ever getting bored of fighting, I could go hang out with some of my bros, and vice versa as well. But anyways, let's take a deeper dive into both of these, and then I'll give my overall opinion. Starting with the life simulator part, there is a lot to do in this aspect of the game. Probably the most interesting and important thing to do is hang out with different people, or confidants as the game puts it. Whether it's your fellow Phantom Thieves, just random people on the street, or your girlfriend, there's tons of interesting characters to interact with. Everyone has their own storyline, likes, dislikes, character arc, pretty much everything you could ask for. You can take a romantic boat ride with Yusuke, the best confidant, or just date your teacher. You can do it all. Honestly, it's such a complex system, I don't even know if I can cover everything. Sometimes characters will overlap and meet each other. You can invite people to places you've already been. Sometimes they'll give you gifts. There's just so much to experience. One thing that brings these amazing characters to life is their relatively good voice acting and dialogue. The voice acting is pretty great, it sells most emotion and stuff, and the dialogue is usually pretty good. I will admit at some points it gets a little cheesy and stuff, but other times it's actually hilarious, so it works both ways. Most of the game isn't actually fully voice acted, usually it's just the text with some expressive sounds, I guess. During actual cutscenes, it is voice acted, but sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what an actual cutscene is. The true animated anime-like cutscenes are great, and honestly some of my favorite scenes in the game. I really wish there were more of them. But even just the still sprite animations are good too. While not necessarily very engaging, with the clunky movement and mainly still sprites, it's still a lot more interesting to watch compared to something like, I don't know, Octopath Traveler's cutscenes, which are actual garbage. Anyways, the little close-up pictures of everyone's expressions are also really nice to watch. So when you hang out with people, you'll often be given different dialogue options, which affect how fast your confidant ranks up, based on if they like your response or not. I had quite a fun time with these, as some of the responses are really entertaining, but I do admit they don't actually affect much of the character's storyline or the main story, until the end, where the dialogue options decide what ending you get actually. Apart from just being fun to do, spending time with confidants is actually beneficial in combat as well. Every confidant you have has a rank that gradually rises as you spend more time with them, and with each rank up, you unlock a new ability to use. Most affect combat by giving you special abilities and such, but some more interesting ones unlock all sorts of special stuff to do in the metaverse and outside of it. One last thing to talk about with confidants is requests. I'll dive deeper into this later in the review, but basically sometimes confidants will give you people who you have to change the hearts of to further advance in your social bond with them. Anyways, apart from vibing with people, Tokyo is full of all sorts of other interesting things to do. Minigames like fishing or playing baseball are usually the most fun, but getting jobs and just eating food can be interesting too. Although I do have one complaint with these things. Almost all of them link back to the idea of raising your social stats, which are pretty much a way of restricting you from doing certain things, which can be annoying, especially when it involves a confidant or a dialogue option. You have 5 different categories to your social stats, and usually each activity in Tokyo will give you points towards leveling up in 1 or 2 of them. Because of this, I often found myself doing whatever activities helped me level them up the fastest instead of doing what I actually wanted. Until I maxed them out, of course, but that wasn't until like 70 hours in. So yeah, there's a lot to experience, but I didn't really feel like I did all that much of it. Anyways, one thing that takes up most of your time in the real world is, well, school. School mostly consists of attending classes and answering questions, or sometimes the odd exam. I didn't usually mind it, but sometimes it did feel like a waste of time. So if you couldn't tell, time management plays a very big role in Persona 5. Most Phantom Thief missions have a deadline that you have to complete the palace by, unless you want to get sent back an in-game week, which is a pretty long time. I was pretty worried about this before I started because I thought it would be too stressful and not very fun, but in the end, it wasn't that bad. I do admit some aspects of sleeping and stuff could get annoying, and by the end I wish I had more time to spend with my confidants, but it was all okay. I got a max rank on my favorites, so I'm okay with that. For a quick perspective on the idea, usually you're given about 20-ish days to complete a palace, and if you do it fast enough, it can be done in like 4 or 5 days, so it's pretty easy. Before we get into the metaverse, 2 last things I want to say are that the music is absolutely phenomenal, whether it's in Tokyo or the metaverse, and that graphically wise, the game actually isn't very wonderful. Now obviously the style is amazing, I mean the menu looks better than 90% of games out there, but it is still a PS3 game. Some of the animations and locations look very blocky and pixelated, but I never really minded. So yeah, that's about it for the one half of the game. Now on to the probably more interesting part, the combat. So the metaverse. I already went over all the basics of the story, but overall I think it was pretty good. Not gonna lie, from like the 40 to 65-ish hour mark, the game started to get really dull and not very interesting. Then this one insane part happened, the pace picked up, and until the end it was a joyride. People who have played the game probably know what I'm talking about, so yeah. The story is interesting with fun characters, neat twists and turns, and a very satisfying ending. I got the one true good ending. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. The combat. So you participate in these turn-based battles with your teammates, up to 4 at one point. And wow, I mean honestly, wow. The battles are so flashy and amazing. They just have so much style and character to them. Like honestly, I can't even stress how neat these battles look. All the special things you can do, like critical attacks, gun specials, and the pinnacle of style, all-out attacks. So yeah, there's a lot of options. You can use items, melee attack, just shoot people, cause why not? heal, or use your persona to do special elemental attacks. Each character has unique abilities and moves, so it's always exciting when you got a new party member and got to try out all of their new stuff. As with most turn-based games, most party members fit under a category, like support or offensive, and Persona 5 is no different. Except Joker, he just kinda claps at everything. But yeah, most of the party members felt unique, all with their own special tactics and strategies. My go-to was always Joker, Fox, Queen, and either Noir or Mona, but I did switch it up quite a bit when I got the ability to do so easily. So I briefly mentioned elemental attacks. I don't really know if they're considered elementals, but I don't know. And I'll expand a bit more on that. Each shadow, or enemy, and each of your party members have elements they are weak and strong against. This is usually the best way to defeat enemies, as enemies will get knocked down if hit with whatever they're weak against, letting you finish them off with an all-out attack or get some extra money or an item from them. Although I must say that weaknesses can be a little broken at some points. You can chain giant combos, wiping out huge groups of enemies in practically one move. By the end of the game, most enemies actually don't have any weaknesses, which does make the whole thing a lot more complicated. Oh yeah, so one thing that was annoying with combat was the infamous one-hit kills. If Joker dies, you go back to the last safe room, which were spaced out really weirdly, some with huge gaps or some with no gaps at all. Joker gets one hit so easily sometimes, it can be a real pain. But overall, with all of the different options available during battles, it's a fun and complex system. But as I said earlier, by the end everything was starting to get a bit dull. It's a very long game, and in terms of combat, not much new is really introduced after the first 20 hours or so, making it feel very repetitive. Really, the one thing that does change is the enemies based on whatever palace you're in. Speaking of palaces, they are okay. Most of them aren't extremely interesting or insanely well designed, but most of them just consist of fights and stuff, but the odd puzzle that comes around is usually simple or not really fun. Lots of the palaces have certain gimmicks, which were mostly kinda meh, but some were fun. At the end of each palace comes a boss fight, which were actually relatively good. They require a lot more skill than actual fights, and they were usually some of the most interesting things. Sometimes they dragged on a little too long or had dumb mechanics, but for the most part, I didn't mind. So personas are usually the main thing you use in combat, and they were actually pretty fun. You can collect so many of them, and each one is unique with its own neat design and moves. In this mysterious place called the Velvet Room, you can combine moves and do all sorts of things with your personas until you create the ultimate persona. This can only be done for Joker, by the way, hence him being rather broken. Anyways, I had a lot of fun messing around with personas and mixing them up. Oh, and one last thing about combat is auto-healing was so nice. So yeah, while palaces are the main part of the game, there's also this place called Mementos. It's basically an unexplained, endless dungeon that gets a lot more important in the end, but I won't spoil anything. It's full of more people with distorted hearts, and it's where you carry out those requests I was talking about earlier. People in the real world would give you requests on people who you should change the heart of, and you do so in Mementos. They're kind of like mini boss fights, but none of them I had a hard time with. If you could tell, Mementos is kinda meant for grinding out levels, which is something I personally hate doing, which is also why I'm glad to say it was never necessary. I only went to Mementos for requests, and I beat the game fine. No grinding required, which was a huge relief. So, as we begin to wrap up this review, there's just a couple of things I want to discuss. Well, I'm not really up to it right now. The New Game Plus feature looks like it's really interesting and has a lot of cool things to offer. I would also like to eventually go for the Platinum, but it's a very big time commitment. Although no trophies actually look absolutely horrible or anything. So yeah, this is where the review comes to an end. I feel like I probably didn't cover everything and like I missed some stuff, which was actually a problem I had with the game too. After reading all sorts of stuff about it, watching videos on it, all that jam, I felt like I missed so much, which was kinda disappointing. Anyways, I still stand by what I said at the beginning. Persona 5 is a great game, but it isn't perfect. While I can't really decide if I like the combat or life simulator stuff better, I know that my opinion on that switched a lot during the game. So in the end, I'll give Persona 5 an A, I think. It's a very big time and mind commitment, but for anyone looking for stylish visuals and a good story, Persona 5 is the game for you. Anyways, thanks for watching this very long review, and I hope to see all you guys in another video. Thanks again. Bye.